It's great to be here this morning. And we are digging our way through the Lord's Prayer, aren't we? And today we have got to line 4 or section part 4, which is give us this day our daily bread. So we'll just wind back a bit and set the context. So the Lord's Prayer is in and amongst the Sermon on the Mount. And you can picture the scene. Jesus is instructing his disciples, and listening on, there's also a crowd. And this is a fantastic piece of scripture. If you want to know how to live your life, then the Sermon on the Mount is the place to go. And at this point, Jesus is instructing his disciples how to pray. And we get to this line, give us this day our daily bread. So we want to dig a bit deeper, don't we, and kind of really chew that over and see what that means. And if we're going to do that, there's 3 important questions for me when I'm digging. And they are the what, the why, and the how. So what are we asking for? Why are we asking for it? Is it important? Does it matter? How should we ask? Does that make a difference? So we're going to start with, what are we asking for when we ask for our daily bread? Well, the most obvious thing is that we are asking for physical sustenance. Nothing difficult about that. Asking God to provide us with the food that we need for the day. Asking God to supply our basic needs. And the bread represents that. It represents what we need for the day. Just such a practical thing, isn't it? God, give me what I need for the day. And then the thing that I love about the Lord's Prayer is it's corporate, isn't it? You'll know if you've heard me preach before how much I love the corporate. I love team, I love collaboration, and I love the fact that the Lord's Prayer starts with, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. And the bread will always represent something to share. So we're asking God for ourselves, and we're asking him for others also. There are many examples in the Bible of where bread is shared. If you do a word search on bread, it's mentioned a lot. In Exodus 12, we've got the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Imagine a whole feast about bread. Brilliant. If you like bread, I love it. A whole feast. And then there in Matthew 14, there is the feeding of the 5,000. What are they fed on? They're fed on bread. Bread that's shared out amongst the people. And then we find numerous examples throughout the Bible, starting right in Genesis, of when the visitors turn up, what's the first thing that somebody does? Now, in our culture, what's the first thing that somebody does when people turn up? You put the kettle on. We're having a cup of tea, aren't we? The first thing they do in Middle Eastern culture is somebody nips out and starts making the bread. Somebody gets the oil and the flour, and they're like, right, we'll get the bread going. First thing we're doing. Because it's all about hospitality. It's about when the visitors arrive. It's about sharing something that's not just for ourselves. We're asking for enough for us and enough for others. And in that kind of culture, in the Middle Eastern culture, it would be unthinkable to just have stuff for yourself. There would always be enough to give away. Now, there's an Arabic saying, my Arabic is not good, so I am not going to actually speak the Arabic. But there's an Arabic saying that loosely translates into English as, there is bread and salt between us. And it's an expression of alliance, an alliance that's formed when we break bread together. It says, no matter who you are, no matter what's happening in the world, when people share a meal together, they have an unbreakable bond. That's powerful, isn't it? And when we ask for bread, we're asking in community. We're asking for fellowship. We're asking for connection. We're asking for enough for ourselves and to give away. And thirdly, bread represents the life of Jesus and our life in Jesus. Give us this day the daily presence of Jesus. Gina, can you put up John 6:32-35? So this is Jesus talking to the crowd. Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, it is not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is the bread that comes down from heaven and gives life to the world." Now, bearing in mind, this directly follows a line that we have said, which is, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done." Here is a massive clue, because it's the bread of God that comes from heaven and gives life to the world. He then goes on to say, the crowd say, "Sir," they said, "always give us this bread." And then Jesus declared, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty." Now, I'm interested that Jesus declares that this is the bread that comes from heaven and gives life to the world. Now, you'd think that that's good, wouldn't you? Well, it's given life to the world, fantastic. But these people, it's not enough for them. They say, "Sir, always give us this bread, not just for the world. Give it to us. Make it personal." And this is the point at which we go from "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven," a wonderful general prayer, to "I want it for me. We want it for us." This is personal. This is not a big bedroom prayer about world peace. This is, it's for me and I can make a difference. Give me this bread. And at this point, it's about the life of Jesus in us. Give me this every day, the life of Jesus that will make a difference for me and will make a difference for the world. It becomes personal. And then we're asking for a daily reminder of what Jesus did for us on the cross. Every day we remember that he gave his life for us. And at the Last Supper, Jesus says these words from Luke 22. "And he took the bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it, and he gave it to them," that's his disciples, saying, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." When we ask for the bread, we ask to remember the sacrifice that Jesus made. We remember daily what Jesus did. And just as physical food will bring us sustenance, just as physical food will bring us comfort, then let the daily remembrance of Jesus bring us spiritual food, bring us spiritual sustenance. Let it propel us towards gratitude and rejoicing for what Jesus did. And the other thing we're asking for, not just the bread, because I always think this is an interesting line. We don't just get, "Give us this bread," or "Give us our daily bread." We get, "Give us this day our daily bread." It's a very now thing, isn't it? But I believe that we're also asking for the day. We're not just asking for the bread. We're asking for life today. We're asking for the day and everything that it entails. We're asking that there be nothing in the day that be wasted or lost. It says in Psalm 118, verse 24, "This is the day the Lord has made, and we will rejoice and be glad in it." Give us this day. Give us this day of rejoicing. And in John 10:10, Jesus says, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy." Bearing in mind, in a minute, we're going to see a line that says, "Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." Because it's all linked, isn't it? The devil comes to steal and destroy, but Jesus says, "I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." We're asking for the day. We're asking for a day full of life, full of potential. And I don't know if any of you do the Lectio 365 app, but there is a closing prayer. And the first line of it is, "Help me to live this day to the full." We are asking God for a full day, a day that not only has provision of the bread, but it's a day full of potential, a day that we can live to the full. So that's what we're asking for. It's a lot, isn't it? I'm sure there's some other things we're asking for. Who knew in one line that we were just asking for all of that? And I don't think that list is exhaustive. I think there's plenty more to go at. Why should we ask? I often ask why. I think I sometimes exasperate my husband because I ask why. Why do we need to do that? Why is that happening on the news? Why is that going on? But why should we ask? Well, the first and most obvious thing is that we should ask because Jesus told us to. He says, this is how you should pray. You should ask like this. And before that, there's a line just before that that says, God knows what you're going to ask before you ask it. So it's like, well, why do we need to ask then? Well, he tells us to. And when we ask, it's that act of vulnerability and submission. We're not asking for God. God's not needy. But we're asking God because we're asking for connection. We're asking for collaboration. We're asking because Jesus says, this then is how you pray. But in that instruction, there is also an invitation. We ask because we can. It's an invitation. In Luke 11, verse 10, it says, everyone who asks receives. He gives us license. He gives us permission. We are allowed to ask. We are encouraged to ask. We should be specific when we ask because there is an open invitation of heaven that we do ask and that we can ask. And we should also ask because actually we will die without provision. We will die without physical food, but we will die without spiritual food as well. It's an acknowledgement of our total trust in God, our reliance on God, Jehovah Jireh, our provider. There's a verse in a passage in Deuteronomy 8. The passage is entitled, Do Not Forget the Lord. You got that one, Gina? Yes. You may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth and so confirms his covenant, which he swore to your ancestors, as it is today. Do you know, it's easy to think, isn't it, that we've worked hard, we provided it for ourselves, that we're doing okay. Bren and I, we met at university. We worked hard. One of us worked hard. One of us kind of coasted through, and he's the hard worker. But, you know, we worked hard. 4 years, 3 years for Brendan, 4 years for me of our lives. Then we got good jobs. We have a good work ethic. We've worked hard. We've been moderately successful. We've got a house. We've got a family. Look what we've achieved. Look at that. Look what we did. Thank you, Ali. But that's never how it works, is it? It doesn't matter how successful you are. It doesn't matter how much money you have. We have to remember that it is God that gives us the ability to make wealth. It is all for him. It is all from him. It all belongs to him. And if he, by his grace, has given us the ability to do that, then it's for his glory. But without asking him, we will die without that provision, even though it may look like we provided it for ourselves. And it keeps us humble, remembering our roots, remembering where we came from, remembering who our Jehovah Jireh is. Without asking, we will die. And it's not just our physical sustenance, is it? We've talked about there being actual bread and then there being the bread of Jesus. There is a direct relationship between the bread that keeps us physically alive and the bread that keeps us spiritually alive. Jesus in Matthew 4 reminds the devil is taunting him. He's been fasting for 40 days. He is starving. And the devil says to him, well, those rocks, just turn them into a nice loaf of bread. Wouldn't that be delicious? Imagine. Freshly baked bread. There's something about the smell of freshly baked bread, isn't there? It gets your saliva going. Imagine Jesus could have just done that. But Jesus says to the devil, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. We need both of those things. We ask God because we can't live without him. We need God. We need his presence. In Exodus 25, verse 30, God is setting out the details of the tabernacle. And there's lots of wonderful detail about the furniture and the gold and the tent and the clothes. And there's a table. And it says in verse 30 that on the table should be put the bread of the presence. And the bread of the presence was 12 loaves that represented the 12 tribes of Israel. And it was symbolic of God as the life source. And we ask because we cannot live without our life source. We ask for the bread that is the source of our lives, God. So how then should we ask? Well, this is an interesting one. The first thing is we should be persistent and consistent. We've heard about this morning. We were talking about it in the prayer meeting as well, about repetition, about asking for things again and again. We're talking about how children love repetition. Do it again, Daddy. Where they want the same book, don't they? You know, when you read, really, I've read this Thomas the Tank Engine book 1,000 times and you still want that one. There's that repetition, isn't there, of being persistent. Kids are persistent, aren't they? Mummy, Mummy, Daddy, Daddy. They just keep going. But you know, there's something about that Jesus tells us. There's a passage in Luke 11, and in Luke 11 is the other place that we see the Lord's Prayer. And immediately after it is this really interesting story. Jesus tells the story of a man who goes to his neighbour in the middle of the night. Picture it now. I'm at your house and I'm knocking on your door. And he says, I want some bread. And then Jesus says, just keep going. Just keep asking him. And eventually he'll give in. Not because he's your friend, but just because he wants you to stop and you won't and you're just being persistent. I'm like, what is this? But do you know what? It must be a clue. There's nothing wasted in the Bible, is there? It's not just a funny or a nice or a quirky story. And it says in Luke 11, in the New Living Translation in particular, if we've got that one. But I tell you this, even though he won't do it for friendship's sake, if you keep knocking long enough, he will get up and give you whatever you need. This is in the New Living Translation, because of your shameless persistence. Shameless persistence, shameless audacity it has there. That's a bit of a fancy word, isn't it, if you don't have English as your first language. But anyway, you're shameless, just knocking on the door. Keep going, keep asking. But it's Jesus' instruction. Be persistent and be consistent. Keep asking. There is a principle there that we need to just keep going. So many of the things that Jesus says are wrapped up in a parable, aren't they? That you kind of have to tease out the detail. But not here. This is very clear. You just have to keep going. You just have to keep knocking. And you just have to keep being persistent. So how do we ask? Persistently and consistently. Secondly, we ask simply and directly. There is no flowery language in this. Give us this day our daily bread. There is no please. What's that about? There's no leading up to it. You know what we're like sometimes when we're asking for things. The thing is, I hate to ask, but is it okay? God, I'm not asking for myself. I feel a bit awkward. I feel we dress it up. We've got 100 things to justify why we need to ask for something. And he just says, give us this day our daily bread. Asking can be really hard, can't it? I'm a bit rubbish at asking for help. I kind of like to just do stuff. I like to get on and do it. I like to work out how to do it. Do you know, if the photocopier goes wrong here, I am like, I haven't quite taken it apart because, you know, that renders the guarantee useless. But I like to check everything first. Have we run out of toner? Is the paper stuck? Did we do the right thing? Did we do this? And when I've exhausted it all, I'm like, I have to call an engineer. We genuinely can't do anything about this. That's my kind of, exhaust it all first and I'll ask. My husband is wonderful at asking. He's great at asking for help, and he's also great at mobilising other people to help as well. It's a real strength of his. And he will say things like, I know that I can do this. I know that there's an app for this that I can do, but actually, would you help me with it? Because when you help me, it's so much better. When you help me, it's much more fun. When you help me, it's our teamwork. And I remember Gina came to me recently as well, and she said, I know that I can book this in Church Suite, but would you help me with it? What was my response? It wasn't, oh, for goodness sake, no, I've given you everything you need. Go away and do it yourself. It's like, my friend Gina, we can sit down and do this together. Lynn did a similar thing. What a privilege. We can work on it together. What does God do? He's like, my daughter Sara has finally decided to just humble herself and ask for something. Come on, let's do it together. Come on, isn't that good? I love it when you ask me for things. I love it. And God just wants us to ask. He loves it when we ask, simply and directly, no flowery language. And then we ask with faith. Really important that we ask with faith. Really hard sometimes to ask with faith, isn't it? Ask believing that our God shall supply all our needs according to his riches in glory. We ask the God who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. We ask our Father in heaven. We ask our God whose kingdom is coming to this earth. We ask him in all his greatness. But we have to have faith that he's going to bring what we ask. And that he's going to give us the right thing as well. We'll look at that a little bit more later. But we have to have faith. And then fourthly, there is such wisdom in this. I love the Bible sometimes. In fact, I love it a lot. Ask for today, not worrying about tomorrow. So later in this passage, which is full of wisdom, we see this line that says, don't worry about tomorrow. That has enough worries of his own. A bit of a kind of double whammy, isn't it there? Don't worry about tomorrow. Oh, but it's got enough worries of his own. Ask for today. Be satisfied for today. Be present for today. And trust God for today. You know, if you ever have had any counselling, if you've ever been for any CBT, if you've ever cognitive behavioural therapy, if you've ever gone to a psychologist, had any therapy, done any mindfulness, one of the strategies, one of the coping strategies for stopping our minds from running away with themselves is to be present today. Now, if we all took notice of this, don't worry about tomorrow, it has enough worries of its own. If we were all present today, I'm sure it would really help us. There is such wisdom here. When my mind is scattering down the road about what's going to happen tomorrow and the next day, and God says, just ask me for today. You can't really deal with anything else. He knows my limitations. Just ask for today, and that will be enough. And you can think about tomorrow, but tomorrow be asking for today. And every day, it's that currentness, it's that presence, it's that let's just deal with today. God knew what he was doing because he knows how our minds go. He knows how we spin out. But he's like, ask for today, not worrying about tomorrow. And then ask as if your life depends on it. I know it sounds a bit extreme, but in the West, generally speaking, we're quite comfortable. And I say that advisedly because I know that some people are going through a really tough time. But relatively speaking, the West is a reasonably comfortable place to be. We are not fearing for our lives. But sometimes it's good to ask as if our lives depend on it. To ask passionately, to ask sincerely, to ask because it really matters. We were at an event on Friday incredible event where there was a live Q&A session with 4 people who worked and lived in a hospital between 2012 and 2016 in the siege of Aleppo, 4 Syrian refugees. And one of them was a guy called Hamza al-Khatayab. And he was instrumental in just running the hospital and running the emergency medicine during the siege of Aleppo. And every time the hospital got bombed, he'd have to go and set up another hospital somewhere else. And he just kept going until eventually they were forced into exile. And somebody asked him, how did you cope with the bombs? How did you cope with the constant fear of your life? And he said this. He said, if we woke up in the morning, it was another day that we had won. And you think, our lives don't. We're comfortable, aren't we, sometimes? But if we were to ask as if our lives depended on it, as if we didn't know if we were going to get up the following morning, there would be such an urgency, such a sincerity, such a passion, because we ask God in a total dependence upon him. And finally, we ask with gratitude. There must be a place for gratitude. And we ask knowing that God has provided, knowing that he will provide. We have adoration, we have forgiveness, we have all sorts going on in the Lord's Prayer, but there has to be a place for gratitude. And I believe it's in this line. It's in this line that says, give us this day our daily bread, because we are so grateful for that. Give us this day our daily bread because we know that you will provide it, and we are so grateful. Give us this day our daily bread because it's not fancy stuff. God, you're giving us what we need. You're giving us the everyday stuff, and we are so grateful. We are grateful for a roof over our head. We are grateful for food on our table. We are grateful for the love of our families. We are blessed by the simple things. I believe that I am truly living the dream. I am so grateful for what God has given me. And every day when we ask with that gratitude for all that he has done and all that he has given us. So, we've looked at the what. What are we asking for? We've looked at the why. Why are we asking? And we've considered how we should ask. And I want to just take us back to a quote that Richard Rathod quoted a couple of weeks ago in his preach by a man called Ignatius of Loyola. Sounds quite fancy, doesn't it? He was a Spanish man that did some very good things. And Richard quoted this. It said, sin is the unwillingness to trust that what God wants for me is only my deepest happiness. Now, when we're asking God to give us this day our daily bread, there's a huge element of trust in there. That what we're asking for, he's going to give us. But he's going to give us what he knows we need. So surely, if sin is the unwillingness to trust, then surely the opposite is that we do trust that what God wants for us is only our deepest happiness. That we trust that when we make a connection with him, that when we ask for our daily bread, that he is going to give us exactly what we need. And then, full of faith, we're brave enough to ask for it. Because it can be so hard, can't it, to ask? It can be so easy to just go about our day. But actually to stop and say, God, in total trust and submission to you, I ask that you give us this day our daily bread. Whatever that is, God, whatever I need, I trust you that you will give it to me and that it is only for my deepest happiness. We're going to end by saying the Lord's Prayer together. And then we're going to have a few moments of just contemplation where we can ask, where we can be brave, where we can be courageous, where we can be vulnerable, where we can be humble and just open ourselves to him and say, God, give us this day our daily bread. We're going to follow that with a closing song, a song of surrender. All this is for you, for your glory and your fame. It's not about me, how we should do things my way. For you alone are God, and I surrender to your ways. Can we have the Lord's Prayer, please, Gina? Okay. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For yours is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.